Okay, I'm Luke. This is Jawad. Jawad waving to the camera.
I
There he is. So you recently got a job in software,
Yeah,
and it's
yep, I
your
did.
first
Yeah.
job.
Yeah, it's my first job in software. Yeah.
When did you start?
So I applied for my job in March, so mid-March. Um, and the story behind that is quite interesting, but we'll get into that later. So I applied mid-March. Um, in 2 days, I was asked to come in for an interview, and then went in. And on the same day, I managed to land the job as well, which
On the
was
same
all.
day.
It was a huge roller coaster. Yeah, because of
But
the
fast
whole
forward.
build up towards that. Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
So did they tell you before you left then, or was it in person or over Zoom?
So the funny thing is I hadn't reached home. So
Oh,
the workplace is an hour away. So on the way back, I think about 20 minutes before I got home, I received a call from the manager saying, "Yeah, we'd like to offer you a role at our company." So
that's a
yeah, it was a
pullover kind
lovely
of
day.
moment. Just pull over and just, I don't know, have a moment.
Well, I was on the highway, so I wasn't able to
Oh.
pull up.
Um,
I swerved and nearly crashed the car, which isn't a good thing.
I got the job.
Bye bye.
Yeah, departing this world. Okay, well, so before we get into all the details of that, so you started in, well, you got the offer in mid-March, and then when did you
Yeah.
start?
Well, I was given the choice between the 20th of March and the April 20th of April. The I was observing the holy month of Ramadan. So as a Muslim, during Ramadan we fast, which means we don't eat from dawn to dusk. So it's about 16 hours. So I was given the option of starting after, but I just decided to just take the bull by its horns, and I just started the very next week.
Code and hungry. There
Yeah, I was starving for for some real life experience.
you
I'll
go.
tell you that.
Well, okay, so let's go back to the beginning then. So, what's your story before getting into software?
So it's not your typical. I've always wanted to be a coder because I've never wanted to be a programmer. It's something which it just came about somehow. It just so a brief history. So because I live in the UK, we have these studies called our GCSEs, which is I think the equivalent of high school in America. So after my GCSEs, we have a 2 year gap which is called higher studies, and these studies or the grades of these studies determine which place you get at a university. So during these 2 years, I studied physics and maths and religious studies, and although they sound very fancy, I didn't do very well in those subjects. For some reason, I just lost motivation, and I think in my second year, uh, I just didn't prepare for any of my finals, any of my exams, and the results day was basically the worst day of my life. Like I was met with like the lowest grades, and I was thinking, I can't get into any university. What's going to happen with my life? What career do I go into? You know, there was just uncertainty ahead of me. I didn't know what to do. So, as any normal human being would do, I decided to study classical Arabic for 3 years.
That's a logical choice. What other options do you have, really?
Well, obviously. So, at the age of 19, I decided it's a bit more nuanced than that. So, as a Muslim, we read the our holy book called the Quran, which is written in Arabic. Uh, and so to gain deeper understanding, and just because I love the Arabic language, I decided to just spend 3 or 4 years learning that. And since the age of 20 or 21, I've been teaching Arabic part time. So I still do to this very day. Uh, Languages, although I haven't been able to learn many during my years, it's something which it has a special place in my heart. Like I'd love to learn many other languages. Um, but yeah, so it wasn't until the age of 23 that I was employed full time. And my first job was as a community development officer, so in a completely unrelated field. So I was working for a charity, third-party charity, and we my role was essentially to work on projects to enhance the community, bring people together, and just uh, give the youth a place to go to, effectively. So I was working in that position for about a year or so. And while I was working as a development officer, I thought to myself, this isn't a career I'd like to pursue. And I thought to myself, well, what could I pursue? And I just looked up on Google. I looked at different careers. I was thinking, should I be a teacher? Should I don't know. There were many other options out there. And in November 2021, I decided to just make a website. It intrigued me. So I went on YouTube. I think there's a YouTube channel called Coda. She has an awesome video on making static pages. So I just began making pages, and that's where my journey began. November 2021. I was just building static pages, no JavaScript, just HTML, CSS.
Oh,
Yeah,
got a ding on my phone. I'll see if I can
no
turn that
worries.
on. And so November 2021, you started building static web pages. And then what happened after that?
So after 2 months, I thought to myself, well, I'm really enjoying this. Um, I was building mock-ups. I had projects which I would work on. So there's this brilliant website called Front End Mentor, where you're presented with a challenge to design a UI with just pure HTML and CSS, and I would just do as many as I can. And then late December, unfortunately, I was involved in a serious road traffic accident. So it was a head-on collision, and I was rendered bedridden for a couple of months, 2 to 3 months. And I would say that for me was my turning point, because that's it was it opened up a lot of time for me. I suddenly had a lot of free time. And I could sit on my desk, and I thought to myself, well, why not learn JavaScript? JavaScript for the past 2 to 3 months had been a huge scary monster for me. Like, I looked at HTML and CSS and thought, why can't I just build all my websites with that? Why do I have to use JavaScript? I was in a very much closed mindset. And I thought, you know what? Let me just give JavaScript a go. And so that's when I started I think Free Code Camp have a 1 hour course on JavaScript. And so I just began going through that, and that took me about a month to do. Uh, but yeah, after that, I just built upon my learning. I created projects. One of my favorite projects was, uh, like, you aware of a game called Wordle?
Wordle? No, I don't think I've heard of it.
So I think in January, at the beginning of last year, 2022, there was a word game called Wordle. It had taken the world by storm. So it's effectively, you have one word a day that you have to guess, and you have 6 tries to guess it. And if you come close, if the word that you guess has a letter that's in the target word, it will highlight a different color to show that, oh, you're a bit closer. So it had exploded out of nowhere. Everyone was playing it. So I just created my own version of that. And that's probably my favorite project to date. Um, but yeah, so during during the year 2022, I just kept progressing. So I kept self-teaching. I took a few courses. Scrimba has been a huge platform in helping me learn front-end development. Um, and yeah, so progressed through the year, and I had two two massive breaks. Uh, One in, I think, June. So I had to take a month. I was forced to kind of take a month off for coding. Uh, well, this was mainly due to a religious pilgrimage I had to perform. It's called the Hajj. It just happened this year as well. So I was required to take a month off. I had to travel to another country, etc. Um, but yeah, so I just pursued my learning, learned to React, and thought to myself, I just want to become a React developer.
Hmm.
Yeah, front end React developer.
There you go. I'm in that world, that front end world, and it's a great place to be. And so I forgot to ask this earlier on, but because I'm from the U.S. and I think all of the people I've talked to for this project I'm doing, talking to people who got their first job in software after
Yeah.
November 2022. I think they've all been in the U.S. But so where are you out of?
Yeah, so I'm from the UK,
Okay,
England, yeah, central England.
okay. So it sounds like you started in November and then we're pretty much just coding nonstop, like self-taught,
Yeah.
courses, building projects, all the way up until this job offer. Is that right?
Yeah, so there were again, so there was another break that I had, and again, it was uh, unfortunate because my wife's close uncle had passed away,
Mhm.
and so it deeply impacted all of us, and so I had to take time away because he was in another country at the time. We had to travel over there, meet family, and then there was a bereavement period. So I I was off for another month and a half,
Okay.
and when I came back, so this was September now. I'm back in England, and I'm thinking to myself, I need a capstone project. I need a project that I could wow employers with.
Mhm.
And so I decided to make a full stack e-commerce website, but based on a business that my wife wanted to start. So she's into buying Asian clothing and she'd like to buy and sell. So I thought, let me, connect with a database. I used Firebase and I just built it took me 2 to 3 weeks, but I built a whole front end, connected it to the back end, filled in all the data, etc. Uh, it's one of the projects I'm most proud of because I had to kind of figure everything out myself. And
Mhm.
during that period, I had to learn new languages like TypeScript and uh, Redux as well. So it was my first contact with global state management. And yeah, so after completing that, I just continued studying, and I thought to myself, I think I need another certificate because at that moment in time, I didn't really have any certifications. Um, so you know, I decided to complete Scrimba's course because I hadn't completed the full course. So I finished that course, got my certification, and then I decided to uh, enroll on a boot camp. So the reason why I struggle to remember because it wasn't a memorable boot camp. I didn't really like it too much. But we'll get onto that in a bit.
Okay, so got those breaks in there, but pretty much off to the races after you first started there in November 2021. Um, were you still working at all during that period?
Yeah,
Like,
so I was working until August, and then after my wife's uncle had passed away, I just took time off, and I set myself a target really of mid this year, like May June, and I said to myself, well, if I don't land a job by then I'll have to go back into something else, maybe
okay,
teaching Arabic or something.
okay, cool, cool. Okay, yeah, tell us about the boot camp then.
So the boot camp, I was super skeptical about after I landed a place. I looked on Glassdoor, I looked at reviews everywhere. Um, Everyone was saying that it's not good. You won't land a job with it. They expect you to apply. So my personal experience after 2 weeks of studying, they expect you to prepare your resume and start applying. And I'm thinking, as somebody who, well, because I had previous experience, it was okay for me. But if somebody who had enrolled in that boot camp decided to heed that advice and started applying 2 3 weeks in, they wouldn't have landed any jobs whatsoever. And it just felt the source material was lacking and everything.
Hmm,
But I just went ahead with it for the sake of the certification because I thought it looked good on my CV. Uh, but yeah, in that bootcamp, I learned Python, and they taught a bit of front end. Um, but yeah, so that bootcamp finished in Feb, and I thought to myself, okay, I have to start applying, and that's when I really just shifted gears, shifted all of my focus into just applying. Every day, I spent at least 4 or 5 hours just
okay.
applying for jobs.
Wow. And so you started applying to jobs, aggressively after you finished your boot camp, or had you done stuff prior to that?
It was only after the boot camp. I
Okay.
mean,
And when did
during my boot camp.
I was
Sorry.
I was going to ask, when did your boot camp end?
Uh, so it was scheduled to end in March, but then I finished it prematurely in Feb. So after finishing it, I was off to the races.
So
Yeah.
if you got the offer in March, then you pretty much were only really job hunting for like a month.
More or less, yeah.
Okay.
I mean, in terms of aggressively, yeah. Uh, one point I did kind of overlook was I had been applying since December, but it was more of a on a weekend. Oh, what jobs have been listed? Oh, there's a React position going. Well, let me apply for that.
Mhm.
But then after the boot camp, I was every day I was on it. I was looking at Indeed, LinkedIn, anywhere you name it.
And
Uh,
it was
yeah,
strictly cold applying is what you were doing?
yeah. So I'm not a very confident person in terms of. I mean, I may seem confident. I don't know, but I'm not too confident when it comes to networking networking with other people. So I'm
Mhm.
not the type of person to hit a recruiter up and be like, yeah, how's it going, this and that, I'm a developer, this. Although all the advice I was given was network like to no end, like make sure you grow your establish your connections, because if you have a huge network you'll have opportunities. That that really not scared me, but it made me anxious, just the idea of having to reach out to so many people. And so yeah, so it was strictly cold cold applying for the most part.
Okay. Well, hey, it worked. So whatever works for you, works for you. That's great. Um, so how many interviews did you have total, would you say? After you like, did you have any before you had started applying aggressively and finished your boot camp?
Yeah,
Were there any prior to that?
the reason why I giggled was I hadn't received any responses from anyone up until the very first interview. So
Oh, wow.
yeah, so that really shocked me as well. And the incredible thing about that is the job which I secured an interview for was so the company is employing a framework and a language which I have zero experience with, or I had zero experience with. So I was employing as a front end React developer, JavaScript, HTML, CSS, Tailwind, all the shebang, all the front end. And for some reason, on a whim, I applied for a job which asked for C sharp skills, .NET, Azure DevOps. And for some reason, the senior developer looked at my resume and thought, well, he might be a good fit. So a guy with zero experience on his resume, uh, no skills in C sharp, and he thought, yeah, let's call him in. So
So wait, that's the job you got.
yeah, so
Oh, wow.
I'm a C sharp developer now.
There you
I'm a
go.
.NET developer.
Well, so wait, hold on. Was this the very first interview you had then? Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah,
So you had one interview.
and and check this out. So this job listing had been put up on a Friday. The window was, I think it was open for about 6 to 7 hours, and I somehow coincidentally found that job listing on a whim. Again, applied, and then on Monday I got an email saying, well, why don't you come in for an interview? So I think
Wow.
again, as a religious person, I believe sometimes things are just meant to be. When
Right.
things fall into place, I believe there's a greater reason to it. And I think in that moment in time, I think things just fell into place because they just had to be.
Yeah. Wow. That is incredible. So this is not real important, but it might be interesting to some people. How many applications do you think you filled out?
Say at least over 100.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay.
over 100. Yeah, cold, and they were all for front end positions. Yeah,
Mhm.
all they were all for React front end developer, or maybe JavaScript developer. But it was purely front end based. And then yeah, I applied for a back end role unknowingly.
Uh,
So yeah,
yeah. What's interesting is like, so I've talked to, I think you're the fifth interview. I think it's the fifth interview out of 10. And, you know, the lowest I've heard on like cold applying like estimate is like 87, and which is a
yeah.
very specific number. Um, so they must be keeping track. And then the highest was like 250 or something. So
Wow.
I am kind of surprised that you only had to do 100, because
Mm.
I think the average is probably north of that. Um, but again, that's a small sample of people, and interesting. Yeah. And so when you were doing applications, like what were you, was it the one click apply, or were you doing cover letters and reaching out to the hiring manager? How did that work for you?
So I mean, it's not good to admit this, but I can sometimes be a very lazy person. So while the advice I was reading was customize your cover letter, I just went on ChatGPT and asked him to write a cover letter for me. Uh, and then in most cases, it was just one click apply. LinkedIn was just too easy.
Okay.
You just add your resume, you find a job, easy apply, done. I was quite
But
lazy in that sense.
for this
But for
job, do you
this,
remember what it
yeah,
was?
yeah. So I didn't apply on LinkedIn. Surprisingly, I applied. So in the UK, we have a website called Total Jobs and Indeed. So they're both very similar. The companies will just list their vacancies on there, and then potential employees will apply for the job. So I can't recall which one it was, but yep. So I was just scrolling through. I sent my CV through, sent my portfolio as well, my web page, and that was that really.
So no cover letter for this one?
No, not for this one. No.
Interesting. Okay.
What do you think about cover letters? Do you think they're important?
I don't know. I'm that interesting. Turn it around on me, ask me questions. That's not fair. When I've applied to jobs, it's I think I've only done a cover letter if I was really excited about a company, but I've never seen any correlation between writing a cover letter and getting a response back. So I don't know. I'm agnostic about it.
Yeah,
So
good place to be.
um, so that's how you were generating interviews. Uh, what was the interview process like? Was it just the one in-person interview, or how were there several? How
Yeah.
did you go?
So the company which I'm working for now is a successful startup. So in terms of the interview process, it's just a well, I'm saying it's just a presentation, but when I received that email, it gave me it was a shock to the system because I received an email on Monday saying, "Can you come in tomorrow? We'd like you to prepare a 20-minute presentation. We'd like you to take a test, like maybe a 15-20 minute test. 10 minutes will be theory, the other 10 will be practical on C# and .NET." And I said, "Well, hang on a second. You've just given me a day, so can I have a bit more time?" And they agreed. Well, the senior director offered to reschedule for the Friday, which gave me 3 days to not only prepare for a presentation, but learn the basics of a language which I had never touched before. I
Wow.
hadn't I hadn't uh, hadn't interacted with object-oriented programming either before that. So in 3 days, I was heads down, learn as much C# as I can, learn as much theory as I can, and also prepare for an interview. So I was watching TED Talks left, right, and center, how to present, how to present a PowerPoint presentation because I had prepared a PowerPoint presentation, but I didn't want to bore them to death either. Uh, so yeah, that week was very hectic, very hectic.
Wow. Very interesting. And so specifically, it sounds like all of the interview process kind of fit into the one day then. Is that how it went?
Yeah, so Yes, I was greeted by the manager, and they took me upstairs to the office, and it was just the manager and the senior developer there. And the first part of the interview process was the presentation. So I felt like I delivered that very well. Like uh, personally, the I believe the reason why I landed that job was because of that presentation,
Mm.
and it's simply because of the first impression that I gave to them. That I'm an extremely confident person. That I'm a fast learner. That I'm hungry for learning. Like, I want to work, and I have a passion for development. And because I showed them and I conveyed these concepts to them via my body language, via my speech, how I presented myself, I think that's the reason why they wanted me there, and not the fact that I did okay on the test. Um, and Yeah, and that's a life lesson that I've learned as well. It's not always about the skills that you possess, but it's about how you come across to people. And if you can show to people, or if you can appear confident, the main thing is self-confidence. If you're not confident in yourself, then your skills will appear as, they'll just scatter, they'll just disperse. Your skills will leave you. But you need to be self-confident. You need to show, and you to know that you can do what you're trying to do. You can do that. You can overcome the endeavor that you're on. Um, but funnily enough, I just like to kind of segue into an extremely embarrassing moment into that presentation, despite claiming that I delivered the presentation so well. There was a moment which I got a bit too confident, and I tried to crack a joke. So I was talking about the project I mentioned earlier about the Wordle game, and I prepared a sentence which was a bit of a tongue twister. So the sentence was, there was a word game called Wordle which had taken the world by storm. And at the end of that, I decided to say Eminem, eat your heart out. And I thought that'd be a funny touch. Yeah, like just to kind of say, oh, I'm up there, I can rap as well. And it was met with deadpan silence. No one reacted. They just looked at me, and I'm like, okay. Maybe I was a bit too confident there. Maybe I shouldn't have tried to crack a joke, but uh,
That's hilarious.
yeah.
No, I appreciate that. That sounds like I would have enjoyed being a fly on the wall. That sounds very funny. Maybe not your joke, but the response would have killed me to no end. Okay, so the coding part of that interview, it was, 10 minutes of theory where they ask you questions, right?
Yeah, so all the basics of C sharp, interfaces, objects, it was purely definition based. So
Okay.
what's this? What's that?
Okay.
Um, yeah.
And then there was a live coding session. Was that like whiteboard, or did they have you get on like a website where it fed you a challenge or something? How'd that work?
Yeah, so they had whizzed up a test project, and then I was asked to just uh, build a table and populate the table with values, and then change the constructor of one of the objects, and to add an extra field on there. So it was all simple stuff, but for me it was very daunting.
Right, right. Did they? I mean, obviously they looked at your resume, so they knew he hasn't done any C sharp stuff because there's C sharp not mentioned on his resume. So was there any conversation around that? The fact that you were 3 days into learning C sharp?
Yep, so they were quite impressed with the amount which I covered in terms of knowledge, that I managed to pick up as much as I did. So
Hmm.
they were very impressed with that. Um, but again, they caveated my application with, well, we know that you're a beginner, that you have no experience, so it might not be a great fit. It all depends on how quickly you learn, and if you can learn on the job. Uh, and so, yeah, so I left that interview feeling, I felt confident, but then at the time I thought I had just completely messed up the practical test. For some reason, I thought I didn't do very well,
Hmm.
but it turns out I nearly aced it. So
Wow. There you go.
Yeah,
Look at that.
yeah.
Yeah, that's I've had the same experience where, and I've heard the same from other people where they're like, "Oh, I bombed that one. I'm not getting that job," and then that's the one you get an offer for. Um, so, what kind of work are you doing now?
So full stack development now, surprisingly. Yeah, I would have never thought 1.5 years ago that I'd be working for a company and doing full stack work. It's more back end than front end as well, believe it or not. So um, started off front end, completely in the back end now.
Hmm,
Uh, but yeah, we're working on a SaaS product. So the organization sells a SaaS. So we're working on just implementing new features, bugs, tickets, etc.
interesting.
Uh, but it's been a huge learning curve, a massive learning curve, and uh, I think it's the beginning of something I hope big for myself, because I feel like I've learned so much in 3 months. God knows, how much I'll learn in a year's time.
Mhm.
It's one of the blessings of working at a startup as well. You have more exposure as opposed to when you're working at a big company. You might only be working on a small module, or you might just be working on bugs. So I've kind of been blessed in that sense that I've had the exposure that I've had. That's one of the perks of working at a small startup.
Yeah, no, I'm all about startups. That's where I've been pretty much my whole career, and I love it for that reason. Um, so SaaS, mostly doing C sharp. Um, yeah. Oh, I was gonna ask, like, what's the developer team size? Like, are you learning from more experienced devs, that sort of thing?
Yeah, so we have a team of six, 6 or 7. I mean, there were seven, six. So um, they're all pretty super helpful, very kind, very sociable. There's a great work ethic there, and the environment is very conducive to work. I believe that's perhaps the most one of the most important factors to a successful workplace, having people you can work with and get along with.
Mhm.
Because I've worked in an extremely toxic workplace before, in my previous job, and I've seen the ramifications and the consequences of having a toxic workplace. Uh, but yeah, everyone's super helpful, and yeah, I'm just really blessed, really happy to be working there.
Yeah, man. Yeah, also a favorite thing of mine about, well, I mean, maybe you get this at other places, but startups, you just get a lot of, you get to know the other devs, and there's a lot of like learning that you do from them, which is really, I appreciate. Um,
Yeah,
well, cool. I think we've run through all our questions here, and we're close to time. But is there
yeah.
anything that you feel like we didn't cover, like aha moments you had along the way? Um, you know, things that stuck out to you in your experience while you were trying to get into software, that you think might be helpful to someone?
I think the biggest lesson I've learned, I think I might have touched upon this already, forgive me if I have, is to just be open and don't restrict yourself to one thing. Now, I set out as a React developer, and I thought to myself, I'm only going to apply for React jobs, and I'm only going to stick to that front end aspect of development. And all it takes is for you to kind of open up and broaden your scope a bit, and the opportunities will come to you. And I believe that that's one thing that, especially in this day and age as well, beggars can't be choosers. You can't pick what you want to go into, I think. And I've learned that as well. Like, I couldn't pick to be a React developer. I think this position kind of chose me in that sense. So I think for other people, the same can be said as well. You just broaden your scope. Don't narrow your options to just one thing only. You can be any kind of developer. It doesn't have to be to a particular language.
Hmm. Yeah, no, I think that's powerful stuff, man. Yeah, I can't believe that's the craziest story I've ever heard. Like, I was learning React and Node and Tailwind, and then I applied to a C# job and I got it.
And I had 3 days to prepare for it.
Like maybe that's one reason they reached out to you was just because, like, man, this guy is audacious. Yeah.
Perhaps.
So interesting. Yeah, you ought to ask him like, hey, why did you reach out to me? And then let me know because I want to know.
I mean, funnily enough, I did ask
Oh, you
uh,
did. I want to know the answer.
today as well. Can you believe it? Today, I mean, of all things to
Yeah.
ask. So yeah, I asked the senior developer, and he said, "Well, we looked at your GitHub, we looked at your well, I have been very active over the past year and a half, so that played a factor, and then my portfolio, I, the fact that I've just been active and I've shown that I'm a continuous learner, I'm a hungry learner. I think that was the major factor."
Those green dots on the GitHub, huh? That's what did it. But, yeah,
Probably, yeah.
cool. That's crazy. Well, Jawad, thank you so much. I can't thank you enough for sharing your experience. And I'll end the video here and appreciate you, sir.
It's been a pleasure, Luke. I mean, it'd be great to stay connected. I mean, and to have an actual conversation other than rather than just me just dictating to you, because you seem as though you have a lot of interesting things to share as well. So
No, again,
uh,
no, sure. But here, I'll hit stop here and then we'll keep chatting.